strumming my pain with his fingers, singing my life with his words, killing me softly with his song, killing me softly with his song.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Podcast Boys. I am one of your hosts, Connor Nielsen, and joining me, as always, is the Comics Kid 2099. How are you doing, Comics Kid?
Hello, Connor Donner, my rhyming podcast host. I am pulling in hot and fast with the references to the movie that probably nobody else watched. I am doing well, Connor. Look, I have told you a few times over the last few weeks how excited I was for this. I was not joking. After watching this movie, I was really tempted to just call you up that day and be like, look, whatever you're doing, stop what you're doing right now. Let's talk about this movie. Because I watched this a few weeks ago, and I have just been giddy with excitement for this film. We are talking about a film called Killing Me Softly. Which,
Don't put the carriage before the horse. Ask me how I'm doing.
Oh, yeah. How are you doing? See, I got so caught up with myself with the trying to reference the movie with a funny joke. How are you doing, Connor?
Oh, I'm
not going to do it again.
I'm doing well, Comics Kid, Bomics Kid, my rhyming co-host. It's getting chilly outside. In some places, I imagine snow is probably falling, but I've got some nice warm fireplace. It's a little steamy over here, and we are talking about an erotic thriller from 2003.
Do you have, with your roaring fireplace, do you have a scarf and hook set up on your walls for some light choking?
No, but I got a cemetery out back.
Oh, okay, good.
So, so this used to be a Twin Peaks podcast. Now we just talk about trash that Twin Peaks alumni showed up in. This stars Heather Graham. So Comics Kid, why don't you, I will let you do the honor of describing the plot of Killing Me Softly.
Okay, so a couple of episodes ago, we talked about Austin Powers' Spy Who Shagged Me. I had to stop myself. It was Spy Who Shagged Me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so when we talked about that, Connor, refresh my memory. You said you are familiar with the film So I Married an Axe Murderer, right?
Yes, I am. Okay,
this is not a joke, but Killing Me Softly is a dramatic remake of So I Married an Axe Murderer. And I'm gonna read the plot of both of these. So I Married an Axe Murderer stars Mike Myers as a poet with a fear of relationship commitment. And then he starts dating Nancy Travis, and she's a butcher. And he, at one point in the film, he believes that she is a Black Widow murderer who gets married and then kills her husbands. And he reads about it in the Weekly World News, and it says one of her husbands was a lounge singer somewhere, one of them was a Russian karate instructor, and it's all this stuff, one of them lived in Atlantic City, and there's all these clues where it's Nancy Travis, she knows this particular opera, and she knows this type of jujitsu, and she lived in Atlantic City and all this. But then he puts it all behind him. He's no, I was letting my imagination get the better of me. But then he finds out that her sister, played by what's-her-face, Christopher Plummer's daughter, who is in Pulp Fiction, whose name I can't remember, and I apologize.
Amanda Plummer.
Yes, thank you. Turns out Nancy Travis's sister was actually the one killing the husbands because she didn't want her sister to get away from her. So now let's get to Killing Me Softly. We have Heather Graham. Her job is she designs CD-ROMs and websites for corporate clients. And as soon as that line happened, I was it was like a punch to the gut, because I was this movie didn't really come out that long ago, but as soon as she said, I designed CD-ROMs, I felt like the bad guy in an Indiana Jones movie where he ages in 10 seconds. So anyway, but she does that for a living, and then she meets this guy, and we'll get into all that later, but she eventually marries him, but then she's wait a minute, he's kind of creepy and I don't really know anything about him. And then she starts investigating this woman who disappeared, and he does mountain climbing with groups of people, and this person died in this mountain climbing expedition. And then spoilers for the movie. I'm just going to jump right to the end. It turns out that it was his sister who did it all because she was jealous and she didn't want to lose her brother. Also, spoilers, incest. So this is like the same movie. Like, it's not like, like it's a superhero movie where it's like, oh, okay, well, he's got a secret identity. He's got a secret identity. It's like the same movie. And as I was watching this, I was like, I mean, it's crazy to me that the kind of stupid comedy movie actually pulled off this story a lot better than this one did.
It's amazing then that Mike Myers and Heather Graham are the main characters in both of these.
Yep, yeah.
With Austin Powers 2 being the nexus point at which they they intersected.
Maybe when they were filming that, she was like, "Oh, so tell me about this movie that you just did," and she's like in her head like, "Huh, okay, yeah, oh, okay." So Connor, I had the absolute time of my life watching this movie. This was hilarious. What did you think of this movie? Because you've been teasing me with this one for a long time. What did you think?
Sometimes one of us will say, "I hate you." Sometimes one of us will say, "I'm sorry." And other times you just get it right. I was really betting the farm on this one. Like I've been teasing this for years and years. I've never seen it. But it was one of those things where I'm like, when I pick it, this better live up to how long have we been doing this? Like 6 years or something? Like this better live up to like 6 years of hype. And God bless America, it did. I can't describe, like, honestly, if I would have picked this 6 years ago, it wouldn't have like been as glorious as it was. This is like what I needed, like at this exact moment in my life. It was a spiritual experience. I mean, I loved it. I loved everything about it. I cannot wait for Criterion to get their hands on it and maybe put out a 4K. I don't even know where to begin with this. This is so gloriously terrible that so I guess for the record, for people who might not know, this is a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a 2003 erotic thriller. So this scratches 2 itches I have. So I don't know if you know this about me. Maybe you do, Comics. I think I alluded to it last time. But I have a fondness for trashy erotic thrillers, particularly from the 90s, but this is definitely riding that wave into the new millennium. I guess I can maybe talk about that more in depth later. But also this scratches a parallel itch, which is this like wonderful, wonderful trend that happens. It happened a lot in the 90s and in this time as well, of beloved international filmmakers coming to Hollywood and then making an awkward, embarrassing movie. So it's covering all the bases. It's like this glorious intersection. Where do you want to begin with this? Because like the first 40 minutes of this movie is one of the most insane things I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
Where do you want to start?
Okay, so for anyone who didn't watch the movie, so we have this woman named Alice, played by Heather Graham, and she, like I said, she designs CD-ROMs and websites for corporate clients, and she's dating some guy. I don't even remember his name, just some, generic white bread guy. And then she just is just walking down a sidewalk and just happens to make eye contact with Joseph Fiennes, the brother of Ralph Fiennes. And then immediately it's like, hey, get in my car. And then she's like, oh, okay. And she gets in his limousine, and then they go to his house, and then they bang. And she doesn't know his name. She doesn't know anything about him. And then you'll have to kind of guide me through this. So then she does some research. She meets him at a bookstore, and then that's where that all gets started. And then she goes back to the bookstore and finds out his name, finds out that he is a mountain climber, and that he does he's famous as a mountain climber because he saves some people, and he does that's his job. He takes people mountain climbing. And then she finds out a little bit about him. I feel like they do another affair, and then she goes and she's still dating generic white bread guy. And then she's like, well, I'm going to break up with him because I'm not happy with him. And then her good friend is like, you're kind of this is really risky. You don't know anything about Joseph Fiennes. And also you've been with this other guy for a really long time. And then so then there's a scene where Heather Graham, her purse gets stolen, which, by the way, in a series of scenes that are hilarious. That scene, we will probably spend 15% of the podcast talking about that scene. But after that, Joseph Fiennes, he proposes to her, and again, like they don't really know each other, and then they get married, and then like that's around the part where like she starts getting letters, so like, hey, how much do you really know about him? And hey, like this one woman sends a letter saying, or no, because Heather Graham also knows a newspaper reporter who tells her that someone told her that Joseph Fiennes raped her at one point. And so like there's a lot of like mystery elements in like act 2 of the movie where Heather Graham isn't sure, like, should I just ignore all this, or maybe my ex-boyfriend is mad at me, and because she calls him at one point to try and figure out if he's behind all this. And it turns out her good friend who told her, hey, you don't know anything about Joseph Fiennes, it turns out she is now with Heather Graham's ex-boyfriend. And so like there's a lot of red herrings where you're like, well, maybe it's this thing, or maybe it's not. Maybe this is a misdirect. But yeah, I'm glad that this is an audio-based podcast, Connor, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep a straight face when I say I think once Heather Graham and Joseph Fiennes get married, this movie kind of works as a suspense film. And like what I mean by that is, like you said, the beginning, like really act 1 of this movie is so bonkers because it wants to throw you into this like, ooh, look at us, we're being taboo. Like we don't know each other's names, but we're going into his house to bang. And like, I feel like it wanted to kind of be like this really taboo, saucy, 50 Shades of Grey, 365 days, uninhibited kind of sexual revolution type movie. But it also wanted to be like, do you really know your spouse's dark secrets kind of story, and a mystery story? And I just don't think it works as both. And I mean, like this movie is a 0% for a reason, but I feel like maybe you disagree, but once they're married and once she is kind of investigating all this, I think it does work as a suspense film. Now, there are still many moments in this movie that make me scratch my head, but I feel like those parts kind of work for me.
I don't agree, but I'd like to. I can see where you're coming from. The thing about this movie is like it has like 5 or 6 different angles. Like it has like a surplus of story ideas, or like I guess I should say story premises, where it's like, or I guess I say like angles. I guess I should say gimmicks, because just the plot and kind of general story of what this is, there's like 150 million books and like Hallmark movies and whatever that are just like this. There's really nothing special about the bare generic like plot description of this movie if you were to just kind of read the beats. It's all of the insane connective tissue that, and like just like general things that you would just think to put in a movie that is missing, and or is just, if it is there, it's weird. So it will be impossible. Like there are going to be so many details we forget to talk about. I just know that already. I might have to do a commentary for this movie. Like I might have to like buy this movie, like draft up extensive notes and like talk. Like, it is like I can't even like wrap my brain around this movie. Like it's amazing. Like I kind of love everything about it. Like I cannot wait to like show this to so many friends in the future. It's a bummer that the only way to get this on Blu-ray is an out-of-print Shout Blu-ray that includes, it's like a double feature Blu-ray disc that includes a second movie that I don't want, but it's like $50 because it's 2 movies.
Oh wow! What's the second movie?
Oh shoot, I don't know. Let me look it up. But like it's so that would be, it's called The Hot Spot.
I've never even heard of that one.
Yeah, just judging by the poster, I think that's Michael Douglas. It's Don Johnson. My bad. And it's actually a film directed by Dennis Hopper. Okay, okay. I might. You go for Killing Me Softly. You stay for The Hot Spot. So I'll see how that goes. But it's weird because it's like you talk about how like there is like that suspenseful, like, can you really trust your spouse kind of mystery suspense element that is kind of what a lot of the second act is kind of hooked on. But there's like 5 or 6 different gimmicks here. The first one is, it's like, okay, bookstores, and like I'm in like a professional thing where it's like I have to design CD-ROMs, and it's like you think, okay, that has to come into play, right? Not really. Like she's like working across the street from like a bookstore where like it seems he works at, but he's not. He's actually a mountain climber, And you're like, okay. So it's like angle one is sort of like the professional world where it's like she was able to be lured away from her like boyfriend she was living with because like, you know, it's like you have to think of like a separate world, right? There's like the you that goes to work. And when you're out at work, it's almost like you're a different person. You can, you know, make googly eyes with the guy who works across the street. You're like, okay, that kind of fizzles out, whatever. Then it's like sex and erotic thriller. And you're like, okay, got it. And then it's like also mountain climbing. And you're like, what? Huh? And then it's like, but not really. That's just kind of like a thing that kind of pops its head in every so often. And then it's like high society. Like he's not just like a mountain climber. He's like a hero mountain climber. So it's like they go to like, she starts wearing like really nice dresses and like, you know, really going to extravagant like dinners and stuff. And so it's like, okay, high society. It's like 50 Shades of Grey. And then, but then it's also like, I don't know if I can trust my husband. Like maybe he's killed like his like previous wife or whatever. And you're like, okay, I guess it's like a hidden secrets thing. But when it's a hidden secrets thing, it has nothing to do with the high society. It has nothing to do with her professional like life. It has nothing to do with the mountain climbing stuff. It has like nothing to do with anything. It's like every time it like steps into a different thread, it's just like completely forgets every other part of the movie. And then it's like she has a friend. She doesn't even have a friend. It's like she just gets reached out to by like a journalist who was like interviewing her husband like the morning after she spent the night at his place for the first time, conveniently. And then like like that journalist just like reaches out to her like out of the blue, completely like doing something that is like a journalist would never do. And then it's just like she's like, oh, I'm gonna like pretend to be a journalist to like start talking and questioning people from like my husband's past. And it's like, why don't you like, why didn't the story just think to like incorporate her job into that? You know what I mean? Like it's just like basic common sense things like that. But yeah, this movie's crazy. And I feel like I've just kind of been jumbled around, but like that's something to me where it's like I was unable to kind of, I guess maybe buy it the way you were kind of buying it in the middle, because like it just kept jumping to like all these different like gimmicks.
Yeah, and I think I had to, this is going to sound like a joke, I think I had to trick myself into pretending like once they get married that like, okay, here is the start of the movie. And like, and then she starts like right at the beginning of the movie, she starts getting these letters and stuff because they're like, and for me, and I think like I was looking at the beginning of the movie as like, this is all bonkers insane in a little bit of a different way than you were. Because for me, like I look at stories and I try to decipher like character motivation. And even if it's something that I wouldn't do, is it something that I at least find believable? And it's really hard for me to make that call with this movie because we don't really know anything about Alice at the beginning. She like within like a minute and a half of the movie starting, she like makes eye contact with Joseph Fiennes and then gets in a car with this man she doesn't know, and he could be a serial killer. Like she doesn't know anything about him, and then they go to his house and they bang, and like that to me is like, oh, that's where we're starting. Like, and that's where it feels like it wants to be like a 50 Shades of Grey or whatever that other one was that I said. And I'm like, okay, but like I feel like, you know, there are like, and I say this as someone who's never even spoken to a woman, right? So I don't know. But like, you know, I feel like if you wanted to do a story about these two people hook up, like traditionally what I feel like you would do is they're at a nightclub and then, you know, she's there and maybe her friend went home with someone else, so she doesn't have a ride. And so he's like, well, you know, your place is on the other end of town, like not to be pushy, but do you want to spend the night on my couch? And then she does. And then from there, things kind of escalate or something like that. And if you wanted to say these two have sex like right after they met, and like maybe she, you know, you could even say like, oh, well, he knows somebody who knows somebody who knows her friend. And so it's like they're kind of like they're at the same place and they're hanging out with the same group of people, but she still doesn't know him. You could still basically have the same plot if something like that happened. And then like, well, if you want her to be just an awful person and she's dating someone when she starts having sex with Joseph Fiennes, you could say, okay, her boyfriend went home early that night because he had to go to work early the next morning or something like that. I don't know. But like, it just, to me, we start off with something so monumentally unbelievable to me, and then it just kind of escalates from there. And that's what makes this so, like, it is baffling, but it's hilarious in how baffling it is. And that was, for me, like, if I just pretend that the movie starts with these people getting married and they've known each other for a long time. Now, that doesn't work with like the big reveal at the end, but I feel like, at least in terms of her character, Heather Graham is a psychopath in this movie, because she marries this guy who she knows nothing about. And then she's second guessing herself after that. And I'm just like, man, I hope that you don't get killed. I don't want anyone to get killed, but like, you could have seen this coming from like 100,000 miles away.
Yeah.
And so that to me is where, like, okay, once they're married, I can just pretend like these are a regular, boring, vanilla married couple, and then she's in like the middle of a suspense thriller. But
hey, you say vanilla, but sometimes they pull out the ropes. So
yeah.
I'm proud of myself for that one. No, so look, let's just like analyze just the first 40 minutes here, because like that, what an attention grabber that was. So you're right, like nothing is motivated at the beginning. It is like kind of insane, because I'm just thinking, like, how would you write this? So like, I don't know, like, so this is as it's based on a book. I'm sure I've never read the book. I imagine it's like a really salacious, like, just kind of, you know, housewives kind of read it. They you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to think of like the proper word. It's probably like a smutty book or something. But when it comes to like Heather Graham, so the whole thing kind of begins in medias res, right? Where she's telling somebody about this. A lot of the movie, like the acts 2.5, are all like kind of her regaling her story to somebody. We don't see who she's talking to. We just hear voices, right?
Yeah.
And oh my God, I'm just remembering the opening scene of the movie.
Where the person falling off the mountain?
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. My mind is going in 50 different directions right now. Okay. I guess I should just respond to what you were saying. You know, okay. Oh my God. Like, this is like breaking my brain. I'll just talk about this. Okay. The opening scene right off the bat. So this movie, like, by and large, looks like I expected it to look. It's just like a generic studio, like mid-budget movie from the early 2000s. The opening scene, like, it looks like a reshoot. Like it's like all shot in like extreme close up, and it's like shaky cam, and I'm like, what am I watching? So I guess I should say I watch this on Pluto TV, which is like a free, like, with ads type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to like stop. I stopped the movie to be like, what aspect ratio was this originally intended for? Like, is it a thing where like, so I know like Tubi does this. So like, if the movie is like Star Wars, where it's like a widescreen thing, or like Ben-Hur, where it's like ultra wide, then like what Tubi will do is it just immediately crops it to like fill your screen, the 16:9 screen.
Oh.
And yeah, because I what's it called? Constantine, the Keanu Reeves Constantine movie was on Tubi at one point, and that's how I was going to watch it. But like 2 minutes in, I'm like, something just feels weird about this. And what was weird about it is like, I could just kind of tell by the way it looked that like you wouldn't frame a shot like this. Like, everything is way too close up. But it wasn't just that. Like, they're not just like removing the sides of the frame. They're also like blowing up the image to fill up the full screen. So it's like there's like a degraded quality to the way everything looks, you know? But anyways, the beginning of this movie, it was just like weird, because I'm like looking at like the people falling off, and it's like everything is so close up. I was like getting like nauseous. And then like the rest of the movie doesn't look like that. It was such a weird opening. I don't know if you had anything to say about that, but that was my first impression with it.
Not about the opening, but the foot chase with Joseph Fiennes and the purse snatcher. Maybe that contributed to like some of the like bizarre like sensations I was feeling in that. But we'll get to that later. That's yeah, like end of Act 1.
Yeah, so getting into like the actual like meat of the story. The only way I can describe like the beginning is it's like it is just a series of like rote cliches, and the only thing motivating them is like an obligation to the genre. It's like, why is Heather Graham having an affair? And it's like, well, it's an erotic thriller. What else is she gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I know nothing about her. She says, I grew up in Indiana and then I came to London and I've been here for a year and a half and I was really lonely for the first 6 months. And then I met this guy named like Jake or something. And he was just the best guy in the world. And, you know, we love each other and we live together. And then it's like, that's all we know. It's like basically 5 minutes in, it's like, great. Jake is apparently just like the best guy in the world and she's in love. And then it's like she's just walking down the street and then happens to be standing next to Joseph Fiennes at a crosswalk and thinks, and I guess he's hot. And then like she's looking at her, he's looking at her, and she's kind of looking at him. And then like she's at work and notices that like he's like at the bookstore across the street, and she's like, I gotta go over next door to see if I can snag a look at him. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing about like I don't know, like what you do is, oh, my boyfriend and I just had a fight, like anything.
Yeah.
Instead they did nothing. And then it's like she goes over to like at the bookstore and then like looks in the window and then he looks at her and she's like, oh goodness, he noticed me looking at him, oh crap. And it's like, okay. And then
were you getting some Sex in the City deja vu here? Where
yep. I'm glad you brought that up.
Your oh no, he saw me voice was like, I was like, hey, that's his Carrie Bradshaw voice.
I'm glad you recognized that. By the way, that was hilarious. Like the beginning of the movie, I wasn't sure what like their angle with the main character was. Is it like, is she supposed to be like mousy and like, you know, kind of homely and just like an everyday girl who like the, you know, sexy, amazing, rich hero mountain climber just like picks out of like, you know, needle in the haystack basically, and it's like a Cinderella type fantasy thing? Is that what it's supposed to be? Because that's funny to me because she's Heather Graham.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't buy her as like the mousy like wallflower if that's what they're going for. But I don't know if that's what they're going for. And then like he opens up like his door, like, or like a door to like a cab. They get into the cab together and then they're just sitting next to each other and like driving awkwardly. And then he asks her what her name is. And I'm just thinking like, what? Like you don't know each other's name? Like, I don't know, like I've been talking too much, but like there's a, like, I don't know about you, but like for myself, like I've done a little bit of writing, right? My favorite kinds of like, those are like my favorite scenes to write is like you have two characters, they've met each other and you need to get them to a location together. They don't really know each other. Maybe they have like a sort of an attraction to one another. Okay, now you got to kind of write the awkward but charming dialogue where they're kind of talking and like, you know, maybe it's a little awkward and then maybe they kind of like figure out like a similar wavelength. Maybe they kind of have like a sense of humor in common or something. And that gets them into the car together. Instead, it's like it just jump cuts to like them opening the door and she doesn't even know his name. Like it's crazy.
Yes. Yeah. And like, it's one of those things like, you know, when you watch like creative writing videos on YouTube, usually they don't say, don't have your character get into a car with a strange man and go to his house and have sex. Like usually they don't say that because that's a given, right? Like I don't know, like as a human being, I feel like I would not do that. Even if the roles were reversed and Heather Graham was like, hey, well, okay. If Heather Graham said, get in the car, I would. Okay. And then you would see me on the news, like the Comics Kid 2099 is dead. Heather Graham killed him. And it's like, worth it. But you know, still like, it's just so weird. Like, and there's no other way to describe it other than to say it's weird. And like, I don't watch a lot of these kinds of movies. So I don't know, like, I remember when 50 Shades of Grey was like at its height, and was that like a thing in that where like she just like he's in his office and she's like walking by carrying folders and he's like, hey, come in here. Like, was that what that was? Like, I don't know.
So the dynamic is very similar, and like that's just kind of the thing about when I was saying a minute ago that there's like 150 bajillion of this thing. It is just kind of like a woman's like sexual fantasy. that becomes like a, basically a true crime thing, which women are also disproportionately into. So like I but the thing with like 50 Shades of Grey is it's like I was thinking about that while watching this movie, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but at least in 50 Shades of Grey, she's single. She like encounters him one or two times, and like he's like, smoldering looks at her, and like is like trying to get close to her, and then like there's like all these like kind of awkward contrivances where it's like you have to go interview Christian Grey, you have to go do it. It's like, oh, I don't want to necessarily. I'm so meek and shy, and I just be too intense. But circumstances are forcing my hand, and doggone it, he's just so into me, and I can't resist. Like it's as crazy as it sounds. At least 50 Shades of Grey like had some sense in terms of just getting them in a room together, and it's like they have like at least, I haven't seen that movie since it came out, but at least two conversations before they start having sex in that. Like it's crazy. In this, it's like I don't even think they have one.
No, they don't. Yeah, and so I was comparing this to So I Married an Axe Murderer earlier, and what that movie does that this one does not is that Charlie and Harriet, they have conversations. They get to know each other before they start. Like they end up doing the nasty on their first date, but they at least have a date. And like he met her because his dad was Scottish and he needed to go pick up some haggis for his dad, and she was a butcher, and so he goes into the butcher shop. He had already driven by once before and was kind of like winking at her as he drove by, and so like it builds up to it. Like all of these movies understand that like you build up to that kind of thing. You don't just open in the first. And like if this was like, and we don't really talk about this that often on this channel, but if this was an actual like pornographic film, I mean, I guess you could call it that, but if that was what it was, where it's like people don't care about the plot, people just want to see them take their clothes off and do the nasty, then no, probably nobody would be, maybe people would be laughing at the lack of plot, but like people would understand, okay, but that's not why I came here. But with a movie like this, like there's some understanding that we did come here for some kind of plot, and it's like it really does feel like you're watching a different kind of film.
Yeah. So now I guess this is like probably my opportunity to kind of explain why I like trashy 90s erotic thrillers. And it's for that reason. Like I just love them as like it's just like a bold-faced lie that they inevitably have to like follow through on. So like I was kind of describing it as like at the end of our last video, or our last podcast, is that it's like there's a kid with like chocolate smeared on his face, and you say, "Did you have chocolate?" And they go, "No," and it's like because it's like that's so. With this, like it's so transparent what it is. It's just like it's a woman's sexual fantasy. They want to be swept up by the mysterious bad boy rich guy who's a hero mountain climber, and then like get like taken into like this world of passion, and it's intense, and it's all that, and then it's like they have to go and then someone goes, oh, so this is just like your kink, right? Like this is kind of what you get off to, and they have to go, no. There's a story here, it's about can you really know somebody, and like it's about stuff, and like it's like it's so obvious what that is to me, and I find that like weird game that it's playing, I find that funny. I find it very entertaining. Like and like I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Cruel Intentions.
I've heard of it. I haven't watched it.
Okay, like I haven't seen it either. It's apparently a remake of Dangerous Liaisons, which I've not seen either. I want to see the Dangerous Liaisons, which is apparently a very good movie, before I see the crappy 90s erotic thriller remake of it, starring like Sarah Michelle Gellar and Reese Witherspoon and Ryan Phillippe. Give me a more 90s cast than that.
Selma Blair, Joshua Jackson.
Oh my God.
Tara Reid. Yeah, that is the 90s right there. I didn't even know half of those people were in that movie.
Yeah, it's I guess Winona Ryder could have shown up and made it more 90s, but like Christina Ricci, but like I guess they have Selma Blair. They're kind of like a trio. But like have you seen Wild Things? I think I maybe asked you that.
I have not, but I've seen the trailer for it.
Okay. So like that to me is like the apex of like this kind of movie, where it's like but what I like about all of these is that whenever it is like a thing where like you go, oh, okay, so this is basically just a porno, right? Like the whole setup here is just like your like sexual fantasy that you're cinematically realizing. That's what it is, right? And they have to go, no, there's a plot here. What I like about it is like once they kind of get all the titillation out of the way, they all like inevitably just get nuts. Like crazy. They come up with like the silliest plots ever to like justify like it feels like compensating for like no we're not a porno. Like pornos don't have someone shooting and killing somebody with a flare gun in a graveyard. Like absolutely not, right?
Sorry,
so, like,
you just unlocked that memory for me. I was like, oh yeah, that is a thing that happens in here.
But like what I like about Wild Things is it's like that movie starts off and it's like it's super 90s. There's like Smash Mouth covering Why Can't We Be Friends. It's got Matt Dillon, it's got Nev Campbell, it's got I want to say Tara Reid, but it's not. It's Dr. Christmas Jones from
Denise,
that one.
Is it Denise?
Yeah. Denise Richards, yeah. It's got all them, and then it's like that movie takes a hard left turn where it's like, actually, you thought this was like a titillating, erotic thriller, but it's actually a movie about rape accusation, and you go, oh. And it gets like really serious, and like Bill Murray shows up as like the comic relief like lawyer, and it's like you don't see the whole incident, but like Denise Richards is like accusing Matt Dillon, who's like the guidance counselor, the very popular guidance counselor at the school, of like raping her, and it's like, oh, it gets like really serious, and it's like, but you don't see the thing, like is she accusing him? But it's like he might be the likable guidance counselor, but it doesn't mean he still couldn't have done it, and you're like, oh, like this is actually like kind of compelling out of nowhere. And then it goes, now we're just kidding. And it gets insane. It turns out that like Denise Richards and Matt Dillon like planned the whole thing because they're actually like together and like trying to kill Denise Richards' mom, who was like rich, so that they can get all the money. And then also Nev Campbell's. Like it's so silly. It's great. It's great. I love it. And anyways, but like this movie is like kind of that thing where it is like wacky, but they have to pretend like they have to play it straight. Like there's no other they can't play any other hand. And that's what I like about these movies.
Yeah. And if you are like, I of course it's too late now, but if anyone ever, if I'm never like, if a coworker says like, so what's the last movie you watched? I'm gonna like, I don't know. Like, but like if someone was like, if somehow I got in a conversation with someone about this, I would say, do not look up anything about this movie. Like I should have just given my like unabashed recommendation right at the top of the video, because like this, if you know anything about it going in, I feel like it spoils the adventure. Like just going into this, I knew nothing. Like I did not look up anything about it. All I knew was Heather Graham was in it, Joseph Fiennes was in it, and 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I didn't know anything, and I am so glad that I did not, because it's just really so much more of an interesting experience if you like, oh, and now we're going in this direction, and now we're going in this direction. And like you said, like it's, somebody is wanting to put some really steamy scenes on a movie. I think maybe 3 in this one, and then they want to string that together with a semblance of a plot. And then they're like, okay, well, what kind of plot? Well, it's a mystery story. But like a mystery story generally has like clues. And like there's this TV movie called Murder 101, where Pierce Brosnan is a college professor teaching a class on how to write a murder mystery. And in that movie, they say like, a really good murder mystery is the kind where after it's revealed who did it, you smack yourself in the head and you say, of course, why didn't I see that? And this is not that. This movie pulls a bonkers reveal at the end, but it does not, it's not a play fair mystery. I don't feel like I could have said, oh, I bet it was her doing all this, right? Like it's just there. It's just there because like, well, we need to have some kind of escalation of events. That happens a lot. Any movie, the ending is going to be a lot more insane than the beginning most of the time. Like, I don't know. Iron Man like starts off where it's just he's a guy and he's selling his weapons, and then the end it's like he's got a metal suit and he's fighting another guy, and like there's an escalation. Right. And so this movie is like, well, we have to do that, and then they just, I don't know, pulled something out of a hat and they said, sure, let's do that.
Yeah. So we've kind of been teasing it. You want to talk about the perch snatching scene?
Yes.
So I guess we should probably set it up where so she randomly starts an affair with Joseph Fiennes because it's an erotic thriller. What else is she supposed to do? And then after having a couple of one-offs with him at his sister's house, more on that later. But what happens is she breaks up with her boyfriend. She's like, I'm leaving you. I'm tired of you getting drunk and watching soccer, and I'm gonna go and be with Joseph Fiennes. And he gets mad, and as he probably would. And then but anyways, so she meets up with her friend, who we've never seen before, who's apparently been friends with both her and her ex-boyfriend for a very long time. And she's wearing like a really nice dress, and so they're catching up, right? That's the setup. Take it away, comics.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I was enraptured. I was like, close my eyes, and I'm just like, I'm watching a movie again. And so some guy just comes out of nowhere and grabs Heather Graham's purse, but then he also has a knife, and he somehow gets Heather Graham a little bit because there's blood on her face, but it's happening so fast, and I didn't catch like, okay, did he get her like a little bit on the neck or like on the cheek, like, and I don't think that she has any scars like later in the movie, so it wasn't like a big deal, but he gets her just a little bit, but he grabs the purse and he runs away. Well, then out of nowhere, Joseph Fiennes comes in, and now Connor, I thought maybe, okay, Joseph Fiennes is like a weird, sinister, like stalker supervillain guy. He has hired this guy to run up and grab Heather Graham's purse. And then like he's going to come in and save the day. And I'm going to look like a big hero who saved my girlfriend from the evil purse snatcher. And then like he'll do something to silence that guy, right? Well, anyway, that didn't happen. But that was kind of what I was thinking. I don't know what you were thinking.
I had the same thought too, because it's such a contrived setup.
Because where did Joseph Fiennes come from? He just comes in out of nowhere. And so now the way that this scene is shot, now, you know me, I don't normally talk about shot composition and like camera setup and stuff like that. This scene reminded me, have you seen the film Kung Pao Enter the Fist?
I've not, but I'm familiar with it.
There's a part in the movie where the bad guys are trying to capture the woman, and then the chosen one, he is like on the other side of a field, and she's like, chosen one, help! And then he says, I'm coming! And it shows him running toward her, but then it cuts back to her, and she'll say, help! And then it cuts back to him, but then he's still like on the other side of the field. And then it does that 2 or 3 times where like it will cut back and it's like, wait a minute, by now he should have been over here. That was what I felt like with this, because it is like not until the climax of this scene, maybe not the right word to use for an erotic thriller, but it is not until this scene concludes that we get to see like any kind of like, because it's just a close-up on the burglar and a close-up on Joseph Fiennes, and I'm like, okay, stop. You need to do an establishing shot. You need to show how far away is the burglar and how far away is Joseph Fiennes.
Yeah.
But it's just like super close-ups on both of them, and then suddenly there's a police call box, a phone booth is what we would call it in America, and Joseph Fiennes grabs the guy and like launches him into the phone booth, and the guy like shatters the glass, and I mean he like clear picks up this guy and just throws him into it. And then Heather Graham runs up, and then they start making out. She's got blood all over her face, and then he says,
he's
marry
got blood
me.
all over his hands.
Yeah. And then he says, marry me. And as he was, because when he first came up and saw this happening, he's like, you hear, and this must have been ADR.
Yes,
the best
I know
friend,
exactly what you're gonna say.
The best friend says, she's okay, go. And then he starts chasing after the burglar. And so then the best friend is there watching these two make out, and she's got this horrified look on her face like, is that guy dead? And then the police come up, and these two are still making out, and there's like a crowd has gathered around this scene by now. And then the police, you hear one of them say, we need to ask you some questions about this. It is the best scene in the movie by far.
It is so good. Okay, it's even better because like there's a few details. I mean, it's a lot to take in, so I'll assist you here. There's a few other good details here. That scene is great where we first meet the best friend. It's like one of like 2 scenes she's in, and she's like, Wow, you're kind of lame because you broke up with your like, or I guess she's British. She's like, hey, look, you broke up with Jake, and he was a good guy, and he's basically not doing well. He's like smoking a lot. He's like making nooses every day. But it is what it is. And she's like, oh, I feel so bad. Golly geez. Anyways, I'm gonna go meet Adam. You want to come? And she's like, okay. The whole like scene is like the best friend scolding Heather Graham for like being in a relationship with Joseph Fiennes, and then the scene ends with her saying, I'm gonna go meet him, you want to come? And she goes, oh yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah.
So they're on their way to go meet Joseph Fiennes when the purse snatcher just like walks up behind them and like grabs the purse, like puts a knife up to her neck and like grabs the purse. And the way it's shot is it's like Joseph Fiennes like comes up walking behind them, so it's like this is the way it feels like it must have been a setup, because it's like they're walking and then behind them is the purse snatcher and then behind him is Joseph Fiennes. So it's like a train, and it's like, wait, hold on. It's like if they're on their way to go meet him, like they're coming from like the same way. It's like just an awkward way to like cinematically realize that. Like I guess it could technically happen. It's just weird to do it that way. And then it's like when they are running, like I'm glad you brought up. It's like a 12 frame shot. It's like half a second long of Heather Graham on the ground and like the best friend going, she's okay, go get him. It's great. It's like that scene from like Captain America and the Winter Soldier show where like John Walker like kills that guy with the shield. Mm-hmm. It's just like that, where like Joseph Fiennes like throws the guy into like a police thing, and he doesn't just like throw him into like the phone booth and like shatter the glass. He like opens the door and like starts smashing his head into it, and like turns around and is like, oh, it's so cool, because like they like run up to each other and start making out, and there's like blood on their hands and on their faces, but it's like you can tell like in their head they're like, we're gonna do like the 360 shot where like the camera's like rotating around them as they're like making out, but it's like they only had like 180 degrees to work with, so the camera's like awkwardly just rocking back and forth instead of like going around them, and like the police show up and it's like, marry me tomorrow, day after, as soon as you possibly can. She's like, yes, you're always gonna be with me, say you're always gonna be with me, I'm always gonna be with you. And it's like the most like lame romance dialogue. It's like completely tonally mismatched with what you're looking at. It's amazing. I loved it.
So then that's the chase scene, and then I will give the movie this. I feel like it does a okay job. Maybe it's just that I'm just searching for like something nice to say, but I feel like it does an okay job of like setup and payoff, where it doesn't just they're having a happy marriage and then here's a bombshell that like, oh, he may have raped this woman. Like it kind of builds up to that in intensity, where she and I know we were talking earlier about how like it doesn't know how to build up with the sexual stuff, but then it does. I feel like, and I know you said you didn't think it worked as well, but I feel like at least with the mystery part, it works a little better, because like we start off with the friend is saying like you don't know anything about him, and then they get married, and then I can't remember if there's a note that she, like they're both standing on opposite sides of the car, and like she hands him the note that, and I can't remember if that was before or after the wedding, but like we start getting little notes that are coming to her, and then she calls the friend at one point, calls her ex-boyfriend, and that's when she finds out the friend is now with the ex-boyfriend. But yeah, I feel like it does an okay job of kind of building up the mystery there. And I know you said you didn't think it worked as well.
Yeah, but let's talk about the rest. The kind of, I guess, where you say the movie actually begins. I think that's a pretty good way of describing it, because like you're right when earlier you said like Heather Graham is like a psycho in this movie. Like she is one of the most like reactionary characters I've seen in some time. Like you could just like throw anything out in the wind and she'd be like, oh my god, I didn't consider that, I think that might be the truth, whoa. And it's just weird, like she does not know anything about him and he doesn't know anything about her. Like I don't really know what there is to know about her really. And I don't know how this must sound to somebody who like he hasn't watched this movie. Like I'm sure there's a lot of like times like just an average person has heard a criticism of like a romance, whether it's like maybe Twilight, maybe even Titanic, where it's like, well, they don't know anything about each other, that's a problem here. I can't like stress enough in this movie, like they do not know each other
Mhm.
and they are married. Like and like so much of I think like this movie was killing the credibility. Like I spent all this entire movie with like one hand over my mouth as I snickered. Is just like this movie would just be over if they had a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they don't, and it's like this is like where like the sexual fantasy has to like all of a sudden play it straight. Like, oh no, we're not like a softcore porno. What are you talking about? Like this is a classy, wide release film released by a major studio. No, it's a mystery. Yeah, yes, it is. You know, he's actually maybe controlling. Yeah, you know, and kind of intimidating. Actually, why not? And so, but there are all these like little things where it's like, all she needs to say is, "Oh, hey, why is there a giant padlock conspicuously hanging off of that closet door?"
Mhm.
You know, something like that, and then he can say, "Oh, that's where I keep like my gear." You know,
Yeah.
and then it's like, I wanted to get some of your gear, and all of a sudden there were some notes in here. Why didn't he tell me about the notes? And then you have the intrigue. Instead, it's just he doesn't say anything to her. They barely have a scene together after they get married, and it's like, oh my god, like I feel like I'm going insane.
I wanted to tell you a little bit of trivia about the movie. I'm a sucker for. I love to know as many of the ins and outs as I can when I'm looking at watching a movie. So it says here, Heather Graham and Joseph Fiennes spent 7 days in bed filming the sex scenes, where Graham refused to wear a modesty pouch. I didn't know that that was a thing that existed, and I guess we can use our imagination on what that is, and I'll just move on. And then this was a quote from Ralph, or not Ralph, sorry, Joseph Fiennes. We couldn't be too explicit because the scenes would have had to be cut, but it had to tackle sex in such a way to make the audience feel it had not been cheated. So even Fiennes is just straight up saying, yeah, the audience was expecting porn and we didn't want them to feel like they were cheated. So we had to do it in such a way where they got what they wanted. But what I loved about this, reading the trivia, it says this is number 2 on the list 15 garbage movies with a ton of skin, published by the website The Clever. Now, I tried to look this up, not because I'm like, a weird perv. I legitimately was like, okay, what is number 1? But when I looked it up, I couldn't, like, the website would never load. And I fear that this is one of those websites that do not exist anymore, which is a shame because if this is number 2, I really am curious what number 1 is. But yeah, those were just some things I thought were amusing about this movie.
That's fine.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say about the middle portion? I know that's where like a lot of the plot is, but I don't know if I have a whole lot to say about this part of the movie.
Not necessarily. It is pretty routine boilerplate, like questioning things. It is just kind of, it is funny how like many, like how the evidence sort of stacks up against um Joseph Fiennes' character, where like when you retroactively look at it, it's like, wait, why are you like just calling the mother of your ex-girlfriend who went missing, like on this random day? Like, are you following her or
Yeah.
not? Like,
What
what? Yeah,
and you feel bad because we've already spoiled this, but the sister was the one who killed this woman who was engaged to Joseph Fiennes. And I guess like if I'm Joseph Fiennes, if my fiance went missing and I to this day I do not know what happened to her, I would feel like absolutely devastated by that, and I would probably like keep in touch with the family just to, even if I am trying to move on with my life and I've got like a new fiance, that's going to be really awkward. And I don't know if he told the mom, hey, by the way, I'm engaged to this other woman now, sorry. But I feel like, yeah, you don't want to, pull a George Costanza and just try to like, completely remove yourself from the family, from your in-laws, even though, your spouse is no longer there. But like, it is also like, it's this weird situation of like, I don't know, like, how often is he calling her, like you said?
well, it is. It's okay. Maybe I missed something, or maybe help me out here. Let's put the pieces together. This is, I think, where like the middle gets a little like convoluted, and there's like no resolution, like to kind of explain some of the details here. One, there's like two women in his past, right? There's the fiance he went climbing with, who died, but then there's also an ex-girlfriend named like Anastasia or something, like that's who Heather Graham like finds her letters. Adele, her name's Adele, because England. So like they go looking for she goes looking for Adele, finds Adele's mom. She Heather Graham goes looking for Adele, finds Adele's mom, and says Adele's been missing for 8 months. And it's like you later find out. I guess they find Adele's body, right? That's what they find in the graveyard at the end. But like, there's two women, so it's like
You're
why
right.
Joseph Fiennes calling Adele's mom. It's like that's not his ex-fiance. That's just a girlfriend that he broke up with. I guess maybe they were married actually, because like Adele broke up with him to get back with her ex-husband or something. Like I don't know. It's a very similar thing that no, like it was one of his previous marriages, because there's the picture of her topless in the graveyard the same way Heather Graham was.
Yeah. For anyone listening, so right after Heather Graham and Joseph Fiennes get married, like on the church property, they go over in front of this statue of like an angel, and then Joseph Fiennes is like, "Hey, let's change clothes right here." And like the guests of the wedding, and there was like 10 guests, but they're like
There was two.
Oh, okay, yeah, it was just his parents, right?
No, it was just two old people.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I thought that was his parents. So even his sister wasn't invited to the wedding. Okay. But I guess later he didn't feel too bad after. Anyway, but yeah. So then like they're like, I mean, within eyesight of the church, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you take your clothes off right here?" And then he takes a picture of her right in front of this statue. And then later in the movie, after she's like starting to think maybe he is a serial killer, she finds an identical picture of another woman in front of that statue. And this was weird, like because the mom sees Heather Graham looking at that, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I found that picture after she disappeared." And I'm like, as someone who is not a parent, I don't think I would necessarily want to keep a picture of my child like naked, like my grown child naked.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just found that to be really odd.
But it's weird that like it's not like I as a parent I might like keep it, and just in the terms of like this might be the last picture of my child that exists ever.
Yeah.
But you're not going to put it in a scrapbook.
and be like chatting with someone who's looking at it and be like, "Oh yeah, you found the picture of my." It was weird. And I'm trying to think if there's any like.
Well, okay, you can't get too mad at him for like getting naked on the. It is his family's church, so like like they can get away with that.
Yeah, that's true.
There's somebody like that's actually a detail that was hilarious. Like I was just laughing during that segment of the movie, because like that is just like so transparently just like the wish fulfillment sexual fantasy of, oh my gosh, he's gonna take me away to like rural England where he just has a family church. Why not? And we're just gonna get two random elderly people to, because isn't it just like so romantic, the notion of just like getting eloping at a guy's family church, and then they just find two olds to just come on in and be their like witnesses, and isn't it just like a charming idea? And then we get saucy and get naked in the graveyard out back. Like it's so like a part of that is like weirdly specific, but then the other part of that is like, well, of course, like it's like you're breaking it from reality just to like have the wish fulfillment fantasy element of it fulfilled. It's so funny.
Yes, yeah, you're right. And like I guess this part of the movie, the reason I'm having trouble finding things to talk about is that it's not as overtly funny as the stuff in the first third of the movie.
Yes,
like
no, that's true. That's true.
Like once you get,
it's a slow burn. It's a slow burn.
Yeah. Once you get past the like, there's a whole lot of like head scratching, like, "Are you kidding me?" moments in the first act, and then once you get past the purse snatching, then it kind of slows back down, and then it's something like what you were saying, where it's like, okay, it's kind of funny, but not ha ha funny, but kind of like, oh, okay, yeah. And then it kind of gets up into like really just up in the stratosphere, insane moments near the end, but I did want to say I was able to I looked at the website The Clever. It loaded. It didn't load the last time I tried to find it. Number one was it just says the 50 Shades franchise. So I guess it's just lumping all of those movies as number one, which I've never seen. So I guess they're more erotic than this movie.
I mean, I guess just by screen time of skin, yeah, there's more of that happening. I will say this movie, it's better in terms of the gloriously stupidness of it.
Yeah, I would have to believe so. But there is another movie that we have talked about before that's on this list. Can you guess what it is?
Oh, Showgirls?
Yes, Showgirls is number
Oh.
14. Which I don't know. I was surprised that it was so low on a list of 15. But yeah, that's the only other one that we've talked about on this podcast.
Okay,
But
okay. That yeah, that movie's great. I don't care what anyone says.
it's definitely not as bad as what society will tell you it is.
Yeah, I remember when you did a rewrite of Battlefield Earth, you said Battlefield Earth is one of the worst movies that's ever been made. If you've not watched very many movies,
Yeah.
that's exactly how I feel about Showgirls.
Oh yeah, yeah. I also another fun little moment. So this movie stars Joseph Fiennes as one of the leads. He is the brother of Ralph Fiennes, who played Voldemort in the Harry Potter movies, and also playing. I guess I'm going to go ahead and, unless you had anything else to say, we can backtrack in a minute. But playing the police officer that Heather Graham is telling everything to is Ian Hart. He played Professor Quirrell in Sorcerer's Stone. So kind of, yeah. So
Isn't it weird to think Sorcerer's Stone came out before this movie?
Oh yeah, you're right. This movie
Sorry, I just brain blast. I just remembered something.
Oh, go ahead.
Heather Graham's boss looks like Alan Rickman, and I thought it was for a second, but it's obviously not Alan Rickman.
That would have been great. That would have been so great. Except I would want him to be Snape and just be like snipping at her, or for like, oh, so you had sex with Joseph Fiennes and you don't even know his name. Oh, okay. But yeah, I did think that was, so you have a kind of Voldemort and then Voldemort's brother. So yeah, I thought that was fun. But and I guess so. You're right. Like 2001 was Sorcerer's Stone, and then this movie, and then it was later that Ralph Fiennes became Voldemort. So that's okay. So I guess there wasn't a connection at that time.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because like Joseph Fiennes never really became the actor that his brother has been, right? Like,
right.
And it's weird because like Ray Fiennes, I guess like they're Welsh, so even though it's spelt Ralph, like you would pronounce it because the Welsh is just a crime against English characters. It's pronounced Rafe, like Rafe, like what we would spell as Rafe. It's I guess that's what Ralph is in Welsh. Jeez Louise. But anyways, Ray Fiennes is in Schindler's List, which wins Best Picture in 1993. And then Joseph Fiennes is in my bad. He's in Shakespeare in Love, which beats Saving Private Ryan for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. So the Fiennes brothers are kind of like, not the Fine brothers, but the Fiennes brothers. different brothers. They're kind of like, a little bit of pedigree to them, right? Do you think this tanked Joseph Fiennes' career?
Yes, but like I legitimately like him as an actor. He was in you knew I had to bring up a King Arthur thing. He was in the Showtime series Camelot. And he was Merlin, and he is probably my favorite Merlin. I really like that show. I am still salty that it only lasted one season. I mean, there was some things I didn't like about it, but overall, I thought that was a really excellent show. And like I'm looking at like his list of things that he's been in, and like I forgot he was in a 2004 version of The Merchant of Venice that I've seen. And like he's been in a lot of stuff that I haven't seen, but like he's not just like pulling, well, I've got another really garbage movie that I'm gonna have to do just to pay the bills. Like he's been in some good stuff, but yeah, I feel like because he was I don't know if you ever saw the Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson Hercules movie.
I did.
He was in that for like a minute and a half. He was, I mean, maybe a little bit more than that, but like I guess after this, like he's still in stuff, but he's not got the same career path that his brother has.
And honestly, like this is probably just like I'm just speculating here, but he was in a Merchant of Venice movie. He's in like a Merlin show, or a Camelot show. He was in Shakespeare in Love. Like maybe he's just like a stage actor, and that's what he likes to do primarily. Like maybe
he was in a movie that you saw, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was about the crucifixion, Risen.
Yeah, because I remember you telling the story about the guy saying like,
I thought his name was Jesus. What was it that they called him in the movie?
So,
Jeshua?
well, that was like the craziest thing is like that movie is like really actually accurate historically. They call him Yeshua. And it was just hilarious when I was in that movie full of a bunch of, Sunday. It was a Sunday screening, so Sunday families after church going to go see Risen, and they're like, I've heard tell of this man who is healing people. His name is Yeshua. This guy behind me just went, what? It was really funny.
That's great.
Yeah, I forgot I saw that. Yeah. So anyways, getting back, so I guess the last little bit before things really get off the rails, there's a wonderful scene where Joseph Fiennes is like, he puts Heather Graham on a table and is like trying to like tie her down to it. And she goes, and this is my favorite line in the entire movie. She asks, what are you doing? And then he has like, I guess ropes just under, like kind of tucked underneath the table that are there so that you can tie someone to it. Because he's into a little bit of little light S&M, because he's a mountain climber, because ropes, I guess. And it's really funny. She's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he goes, I'm trying to make you mine.
Oh yeah. I also forgot. So after they get married, they're getting dressed right there in a church, like right there in the churchyard, and then he like for no reason he picks up a flare gun and then he just fires it, and then he explains to her. Well, and then it's like a cut where they're already walking like a little bit of ways, and then he's explaining to her like, well, this is why there's a flare gun there, and I'm thinking, okay, but why did you fire it? But this is a literal Chekhov's gun where but the gun gets fired in the scene that introduces it, and then it gets fired later. But
just like when he pulls that out and then fires it and then just immediately puts it away, I'm like, so that's coming into play later.
Yeah.
You see him put another like round in it and then close it. I'm like, well, can't wait for that to come into play at the end.
Oh yeah. But then they are like in the woods and it's dark, and he's like, we can't take any breaks. I'm gonna make you strong. And then he just like walks on and leaves her. And I'm thinking like, okay, so you've just married a psychopath. And then she finally arrives at the cabin, like out in the middle of nowhere, and he's been there for probably hours. And then they have more sex where he's choking her, like it's got a scarf system. And it's a good thing that these two already kind of know what they're both into, because otherwise, like, he'd be like, so what do you think of my setup? And she's like, I don't really, I'm not into that. And he'd just be like, oh well, that kind of just ruins everything.
By the way, I forgot to mention this about the first sex scene, which happens like 5 seconds into the movie, which is like, like he opens up the door and is like, basically inviting her in without actually saying anything. He just like walks into like his sister's house that we later find out it's his sister's house. Like opens the door and just kind of walks in, and just kind of leaves it open for her to walk in.
Mm-hmm.
And then like she walks in. And he like runs up behind her and like tackles her and like grabs her breast from behind. I'm like, whoa! Like they haven't had a conversation yet.
Yeah.
Like that's like a rape, right? Like sexual assault. Like that's crazy. Like this is like you can only get away with this in like an erotic thriller.
Yeah. I want everyone to imagine that meme of Jason Momoa running up behind Henry Cavill. Like that's basically what. Oh man, I shouldn't
like
laugh.
that would be like a jump scare in another movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we find out. So at some point, Heather Graham, like, the straw breaks the camel's back, and then she's like, I think it's right after he tries to tie her down to the table, and then she goes up to her room and climbs out the balcony and runs away. I think that's when
you're forgetting one of the funniest parts of the movie is like
how
she gets off the table.
Okay. Tell me.
Where like the music's all leading up, and he's like, I need to know what's going on in your head, and it's like the music's all dramatic, and she's like, Adam, I have to pee. And And so he's like, oh, and then so like he unties her so that she can go up to the bathroom, and she escapes out the bathroom window to like escape.
Yeah. And then she goes and talks to Professor Quirrell, and she's been telling him the whole story. And then Professor Quirrell was like, well, I've got a surprise for you. And he like pulls the blinds down, and they were in an interview room that's like adjacent to another interview room. And then you see Joseph Fiennes is in there talking to some other guys. And then Joseph Fiennes is like, having a panic, and Professor Quirrell's like, he came here before you did. He was worried because you left without shoes on. And I'm thinking, like, that's a weird, like, detail. They're like, you should be afraid that your wife is, like, run away. But, like, I don't know. I just thought that was odd. But then basically Professor Quirrell is like, he hasn't committed any crimes. It's your word against his. So there's really nothing we can do. We can hold him here for a little bit and give you a head start. And so then Heather Graham runs. And now this is where I feel like if I was Heather Graham, I would go and find my best friend who is now with my ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing. I was like, Comics Kid. Yeah, who do you go? Who do you know?
Yeah. And I know that they're like, well, we really haven't, we've only, the best friend has only been in 2 scenes. She was in the scene where she was saying, this is a bad idea. And then she was in the scene where okay, so I know we keep jumping all over the place, but I have to, so Heather Graham calls her ex-boyfriend because she thinks maybe he is the one sending these letters to her. And then her best friend answers. And then Heather Graham says, oh, I must have accidentally called the wrong number. And the best friend is like, no, you called the right number. And best friend is painting the room. And then Heather, like, I can't remember, Heather Graham is the one who brings it up, or the best friend finally says, yeah, we're together now. And then it like pans over and it shows the ex-boyfriend is like leaning against the wall, smoking with this like angry look on his face. And I'm thinking, so were you just letting your girlfriend paint your house for you while you're over here smoking? But anyway, so we've only had 2 scenes with the best friend. So I guess maybe they thought, well, and maybe she doesn't know who she can trust. Like, maybe the ex-boyfriend is the one who, although at this point she thinks that it's Joseph Fiennes, but if I think that my husband is a serial killer, I'm not going to go to his sister because she may still emphatically trust her brother. And so it just seems to me like of all the people you could go to, I would not go to the sister. But she goes to the sister, and the sister says, yeah, I believe you, because whoever it was who died in a mountain climbing accident, these hooks that we use, they're able to hold this much weight, but something was wrong. The hook was sabotaged. And so then they go back to the cemetery, and then they start digging, and then they find one of the 2, not the one from mountain climbing, but the other one, Adele.
Yeah.
And then at some point, somehow, Heather Graham finds out that when the siblings were 15, they had sex. And that is what has propelled this whole thing. Sister was jealous of anyone who might take her brother away from her. And it comes so out of nowhere. Like, if you had put a gun to my head and asked me, if you said, I'm going to give you 100 chances to guess the twist ending of this movie, and I have 100 chances to get it right, let's make it 1,000. I never would have guessed the sister and the brother had sex when they were teens, and now she wants to hold on to that. That is just so weird. But I guess in terms of movies with incest, this is the second best one that I've seen. So,
what's number 1?
Fire Walk with Me.
Oh.
I'm glad you like that.
I think I just broke. I just watched Fire Walk with Me yesterday.
In fairness, that's an actual good movie. And,
no, it is.
And
that was so wonderful.
And this is not a movie you would ever expect anyone to talk about in the same breath as Fire Walk with Me, right? So you can be forgiven for not immediately thinking of that one.
Oh my God, I gotta recover from that. Jeez. So what did you think the twist was gonna be? Can I tell you what I thought the twist was gonna be?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go. So first of all, when she knocks on the door and like the sister first answers it, like the assumption is like, oh, this is another woman who is sleeping with Joseph Fiennes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then like, but she's like, oh, hi, come on in. Blow me in it, the weather, boy. and then Heather Graham is like, ooh, like I feel threatened because this is like a super hot chick who's just like answering the door and whatnot, and like Sex in the City vibes are strong in that scene. And then it's like halfway through the scene, she's like, I'm his sister, mate, you know? And so then you're like, oh, okay. But I'm watching that scene and I'm like, is she like the maid? Is she like a cousin, sister, mom? Like, you know, like who is she? The funniest scene about the part about that scene to me is like Heather Graham just like walks in and then like the sister character just starts like word vomiting unsolicited exposition and is just like explaining everything. And it's like weird, right? And then it's like there's like Chekhov's cat, except they didn't have the payoff, right? But then anyways, throughout the movie, whenever like the sister shows up and it's like there's like the part where Heather Graham is like going to like the rock climbing gym for the first time and she's like holding like the harness that you're supposed to put on like it's like an alien object, and you know, like Sex in the City, off the charts, right? She just is like biting her lip, like, ooh, I don't know what I'm doing here. But like, there's like this, like, kind of like the sister character is like giving her like this eye, and is like, you know, Joseph Fiennes comes down and is like, hey, there's my girl. And then like the sister character is kind of like scowling a little bit. And I was like, oh, is the sister setting up Joseph Fiennes because she's in Lesbians with Heather Graham?
Oh,
Is that where this is going? Because it seemed like, you know, she's like buying her gifts and stuff, and I'm like, oh, like maybe like the sister wants Heather Graham for herself. That's the twist. And then we got that twist ending, and I choked on nothing. Like I couldn't believe that is where this was going. It was also really funny when they like dig up Adele's body, and it's like, it looks like the body was like, you know, maybe like 2 days old. Like it hasn't started like decomposing, but it's underneath like a ground that has like grass growing on it.
yeah.
But hey, you know, it is their family church, so it makes sense that you could bury the bodies there.
Yeah. I also like, because the sister in the scene I quoted at the top of the podcast, it's after the two of them have gotten married and they are at some like mountain hiking like party where there's just a whole bunch of Joseph Fiennes' friends, and they're all like, hey, yeah, and they're all like bear hugging him, and so she's just kind of like, I don't know what to do. So she goes upstairs and is looking in the mirror, and then the sister comes in and says, and Joseph Fiennes, his last name is Tallis, okay? So the sister comes in and says, why, if it isn't Alice Tallis, my rhyming sister-in-law. And she says it about like that. Like, doesn't it just kind of sounds like a weird, like, robot? And I was just like, I cannot believe that this is dialogue in that movie. But she gives Heather Graham a necklace. And then later, Joseph Fiennes is like, where'd you get this necklace? And it turns out the necklace it belonged to one of the previous girls, either Adele or the other one. And then when they are uncovering the body, then that's what tips her off that like, oh, hey, this is who it is, because there's an identical necklace there. So I am imagining that the sister just has like, you know, those little things where it's like half of a bust, like half of a torso, and it's just not a head, but you can put a necklace on it.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining the sister like opening her closet, and she's got like 50 of those and identical necklaces, and every time she knocks off one of Joseph Fiennes' girlfriends, she's like, well, time to get another necklace, and give it to her.
She bought him in bulk.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that was right around the point where I guess Heather Graham sees it, and then it's like, oh, it's her. And then the sister starts, you know, monologuing like in The Incredibles. And then somehow Joseph Fiennes comes out of nowhere and saves Heather Graham from the sister. And I have no idea how he knew to come here and how he knew that his sister and Heather Graham would be here.
Yeah, he has that tendency of doing that, right? Like he shows up when the purse snatcher. He just shows up at the police station. He just shows up there. Like, I don't know. It is just like one of those things where like it's the end of the movie, so he has to show up.
Yeah.
And we have one of the most amazing deaths of a villain I've ever seen. Heather Graham like grabs the flare gun that was set up so tastefully and, you know, subtly at the beginning of Act 2, and the sister Deborah is like has a shovel and is gonna hit Joseph Fiennes over the head and kill him, and then she shoots her with the flare gun, and it's awesome. It's so stupid.
Yeah, it is something. So I did have a couple of weird notes about the movie. This won't take long. So at one point early in the movie and then late toward the very end of the movie. Oh, I guess we should say. So then we jump forward. What is it, like 2 years later? And
I was laughing into the credits. What a wonderful epilogue! Like, yes, I loved it. Yeah, it jumped
So-
out 2 years.
Heather Graham is at the mall, I think, and she is going down the escalator, and Joseph Fiennes is going up, and they both just kind of like stare at each other, and they don't say anything, which is poetic because that's how they met, where they didn't say anything. And then like she is talking over the credits because there was this thing where earlier in the movie where she said that, well, I'm a flatlander from Illinois or Indiana or whatever, and he's a mountain climber, and I just don't know if we're compatible. She may have said that whenever it was when she was like, he left her in the middle of the woods and she was trying to get to the cabin. She may have thought that, but then as they're making eye contact on the escalators, then she says, well, even if we had stayed together, I just don't know if a mountain climber and a flatlander could have made it work. And I'm just like ready to hit my head on my desk because I'm like, what are you talking about? I thought the whole like the problems with your relationship was that you thought he was a serial killer and then you found out that he banged his sister, and I guess that was just a bridge too far, and then you guys got it annulled or something. Like, what are you talking about? Flatlanders and mountain climbers? That is not a thing. Like,
and then she says like, and yet I can't help but wonder, maybe we could have made it work with what we had. I'm like, you guys had nothing. You had nothing. Like, that was the whole point of like the middle act of the movie, that you didn't know anything about John.
yeah.
Oh, and did you notice how poetic that ending was? Where it's like, his head he's at a different elevation than I am, and they're on escalators. Did you catch that? Very, very, artful. This is a renowned international filmmaker making this movie.
Yeah. But yeah, so there was that I thought was just really odd that they were trying to make like that be a thing where it's like, oh, I was born on a farm and wherever, and he climbs mountains, and we're just two different people from two different worlds. And it's just like, I mean, there are numerous ways that you could have planted this idea that like they are so different and just not compatible. The problem is I don't know anything about either of their characters, so that does not work. And then you also there was this one really weird moment where she at work, they are talking about they're going to be designing a video game or something. It's not a video game, but it's something kind of like a video game. And she says, here's the problem with this product. Men like games, but women like stories. Now, I'm about to make just a broad generalization. So, I apologize to all the ladies out there. That's not my experience. Like, when I am watching like my friends in their relationship problems, it's a lot of times the woman is usually the one who wants to play games. And so I thought this was a really weird, and I guess it was like, well, Heather Graham is curious and she's investigating and she's poking her head into all this, and maybe Joseph Fiennes would just say, no, just leave it alone. You don't need to know. All you need to know about me is that I love you. You don't need to know about my past. But she wants to know about his past. And it's like, well, they want to set up this theme that she is investigating what's going on. And so she says, men like games and women like stories. But really, I don't know. That was just a really awkward way of setting that up.
Yeah, that was but funny catch, by the way. I didn't think about that. But what was the whole deal with the woman who's accusing him of rape?
Yeah, well, so
I mean, it's a red herring. You need to fill it in with red herrings, but like, you could just remove that and have like, more scenes at the beginning where they're getting to know each other. Like,
yeah. Well, and I guess I'm assuming because she somehow brings it up to him, and I don't know how you do that to your spouse, without like setting off some like tension in your relationship. But she brings it up, and he's like, look, I knew her when we were kids, and she's lying. And of course, you're left there thinking like, well, I don't know. And so at the end of the movie, when you find out, okay, Joseph Fiennes did not have anything to do with the death of Adele or the other woman, it was his sister. So then it's like, well, I guess that means that he was telling the truth about this other woman, that she was just lying. But like you said, it's weird, and like it's there as a red herring, but we've already got enough mystery stuff going on with the mystery letters and with her looking into Adele and that woman. I'm getting the two women confused. And if you hadn't brought that up, I would have forgotten that there were two women. But like she's already looking into all that. So you're right. That did not need to be there.
Yeah, and here's a question: if you're like the sister character, why are you sending those notes?
Well, and she says like, well, I tried to get you to not be involved with my brother. And from where I'm standing, I'm like, no, you didn't. Like, if I was like, she tried in the sense that she was sending those mystery letters to try and scare Heather Graham away. But I guess
like,
maybe
I guess for the listeners, like the letters are just like, you shouldn't have married him. You don't know who he is. It's like they're just like one sentence. Like it's like they're almost like written with like the intent of, I want to make her curious. I want her to start digging. Like they almost seem like leading letters as opposed to like things that'll scare her off. You should. I would write up like a whole manifesto of like, here's what you don't know about him. He's murdered 50 people. And then, like you have like dates and you have like locations and you have like falsified evidence if like he hasn't actually murdered. Like you come up with like a dossier. Like especially like if you've done this before. Like come on.
Yeah, and I guess in the sister's defense, she didn't know that these two would get married like a week after they met. And so maybe she had this plan of like, I'm going to start sending these creepy letters. And then after a couple weeks, then she's going to break up with brother and then he'll be all mine.
Wait, hold on. Okay. Was Adele's thing that she got scared off? Did the letters work for Adele? Is that the kind of the implication?
Maybe that could be.
Because Adele's like, I can't, I gotta go. Like, I'm gonna get back together with my ex-husband. Like, so maybe the sister, was sending messages to Adele, scared off Adele, and was like, okay, that worked the last time around. I'm gonna do it for Heather Graham now. Then it's just kind of weird that Adele goes missing. Did Adele try getting back in touch with Joseph Fiennes? Like,
I think so. I think I watched this a couple weeks ago, but I think that there was at one point maybe the sister said, I tried to stop her, and then she tried to get back in touch with him. I think that they did say something like that.
I wonder what happened to Adele and her ex-husband that she was getting back together with. I don't know. Maybe the ex-husband didn't take. He was like, you already left me before. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just speculating. So I guess I should have mentioned this a while back, but like, have I talked to you about like this whole kind of phenomenon of like international filmmakers coming to Hollywood to make the American movies and like how that regularly results in just kind of these movies?
You mentioned it at the top of the podcast, and I looked into this guy, Cage Chin. I have never heard of anything that he's done before.
Me neither. So I guess like it might sound like I'm to maybe someone who doesn't know who I am, that like I'm like making fun of like a foreign person coming into Hollywood and not knowing how Hollywood works. Like that's not the case. It's usually the Hollywood, like I'm trying to think of like, it's kind of like what happened with like David Lynch and Dune, except it's just replaced like independent filmmaker with foreign filmmaker. Where like in the case of like Dune, David Lynch is like this art house independent filmmaker who makes Eraserhead, and then like Mel Brooks likes what he does on that and then gets him to do The Elephant Man. And then Dino De Laurentiis is a cynical producer who just wants to buy an Oscar and is like, or wants to buy a box office hit and is like, Star Wars is popular right now. What do we got that we can make it's like Star Wars? Okay, we got Dune. Who's a popular, like, up and coming filmmaker that I can have like some level of control over? David Lynch. Cool. I'm going to convince him to make Dune. Like that's kind of what happens, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, you're like, and this happened like actually with Dino De Laurentiis in the 70s. One of like the best filmmakers ever is Ingmar Bergman. He made like The Seventh Seal and Scenes from a Marriage and Persona and Fanny and Alexander and like 100 other of like the best movies ever. Like he's awesome. He has 2 English language movies, one of which is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, and it's called The Serpent's Egg. It stars TV actor David Carradine, may or may not have died via autoerotic asphyxiation. which is relevant to the movie Killing Me Softly. Just figured,
Yeah.
because choking. But then it also stars Liv Ullmann, who is probably the greatest actress who has ever lived. And watching David Carradine across Liv Ullmann is like watching, I don't know, Ashton Kutcher act opposite like Kate Blanchett. It is just like one of the most shocking imbalances of performances I've ever seen. But like that happens where it's like, okay, Ingmar Bergman, you for decades have made all these awesome Swedish movies. Come over to America, make a big Hollywood movie. And it's like, oh, I mean, who wouldn't want to go to America and like go to Hollywood with all those resources to make like a movie? But then you get there and like you're the lowest man on the totem pole. You're just like some foreign outsider who has to do whatever the studio says, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely is it John Woo who like makes all these big Hong Kong action movies, then comes over to America and gets to make Face Off. That very rarely happens. Usually it's actually, there's another instance in the 90s of like a guy made a movie called The Vanishing. I think it's a Norwegian movie. And he came over to America to make a remake, an English language remake of The Vanishing with Kiefer Sutherland. And it's widely regarded as like one of the worst thrillers of its era.
I've seen like 2 minutes of that movie. I had Sandra Bullock in it, I think.
I think so. It's like, is it Jeff Bridges as well?
Yeah, I've seen just a little bit of that movie. Okay, I'm glad
anyways,
glad that I was able to contribute there.
Yeah, so anyway, I just kind of find that kind of like it's a very niche like film trend. I find that kind of stuff fascinating. Like I find Dune interesting. I find this interesting. I find like The Serpent's Egg interesting. None of these are good movies, but I kind of like watching them for just like seeing someone from like a different culture with their own like unique style coming to Hollywood and like awkwardly failing to make it work in Hollywood. I kind of like watching that. Maybe
yeah,
like making me a bad person. I don't know, but like that's what this is also.
And
I don't know. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh no, I was gonna say you kind of answered the question I was gonna ask, because the question I was gonna ask was, why would a producer, and I don't know who the producer of Killing Me Softly was, but I was going to ask, why would the producer choose Cage Chin, who did a lot of like, some of them look like period movies, and then some of them just look like, I don't know, like movies of looks like one of them is like about a geisha. It looks like one of them is called Legend of the Demon Cat, but it looks like it has samurai in it. But they look like period movies or like a specific genre. And so who would say, yeah, that's the guy that I want directing an erotic thriller with, Heather Graham and Joseph Fiennes. But then, like you said, like they want someone that they can boss around and like someone who knows how to point a camera, but they don't have enough clout to be able to try and fight any control that the producer would want to have. So I guess.
And I think superficially it just looks good on the box, right? Oh, if you're like a film nerd, there's like, oh, it's that filmmaker. Okay, you got Joseph Fiennes, who was in Shakespeare in Love, and Heather Graham, who was in like Boogie Nights. Okay, like maybe there's something here. It's just a con. Like it's just like it's like a producer, like what's the term I'm looking for? Like just kind of ticking boxes. Okay, we need to have this element. We need to have that element. Bring in some kind of like an up and coming international filmmaker who's like, so like we can fill that thing. So like there can be some speculation as to, maybe their debut will impress. Who can say? But they come over here and it's like, okay, we need you to shoot this in 2 weeks. Here's your schedule and your shot list. And they go, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, it looks like at least he was able to do some more stuff after this. So I don't know how successful he is, but he has made stuff. He made something in 2017. So I don't know if his career didn't completely go down the toilet anyway.
Oh yeah. I think I'm gonna look him up now, but I think like he probably just went back to whichever country he's from, and like just kind of kept making movies that were well received. Very last question I have. Why is this called Killing Me Softly?
I don't know. I know that it's, like you said, it's based on a book, and I found out the book is actually written by a husband and wife team. They I don't remember their name, but the author's name on the book is like one of their first names and the other one's last name. So it's two people wrote the book, but and the book is like over 300 pages. So I don't know if the book is any good, but maybe at least it has more room for some of this plot stuff to breathe. I may be giving it too much credit there, but they may explain in the book, but it may just be like, oh, this is a, generic title that kind of, it sounds a lot like, Cruel Intentions or Basic Instinct, where it's like, it just kind of puts you in that mood. Like when you see the title and you're like, okay, it's that kind of movie. I get it.
Yeah. I know there's like a song from like the 90s that is it Lauryn Hill sang it, but it's also like, I think that's just sampling an older song from like the 70s.
I think so, yeah.
And whenever I tell people, oh yeah, I'm watching this movie Killing Me Softly, people just go, Killing Me Softly. And I'm like, oh yeah, that has nothing to do with the movie. And people go, oh, well, what does it mean? I'm like, I don't know. Like, why is it called Killing Me? I've seen the movie and I don't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. Maybe it is just like, it catches your eye, or like, it sounds good when you say it out loud. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could think of. Did you have
any last words for you?
I think we have done this movie a great service by handling all of these topics with care and treating this movie with the respect that it needed.
I think so. I cannot wait to buy this movie on physical media. I will have many, many movie nights with this movie going forward. I will sit proudly next to Gotti. I'm honestly glad this lived up to kind of what I wanted it to be. It lived up to that zero. And one last thing I wanted to say about it, that was really funny when Joseph Fiennes pulled out the fish out of the aquarium to like explain what it's like when you're 1,000 feet, and like how like when it's that cold, like your brain cells start dying one by one, and that comes back into play. Not at all. That was my favorite setup and payoff.
Yeah. And again, it's like it's making him seem like he's a psychopath, where it's like, look at this, the fish is suffocating, and then it's like, oh, he's just a nice guy who just had sex with his sister when he was 15, and now he's just trying to move past that.
Who hasn't done that? Once
yeah,
or twice?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I guess that means it's my turn to pick something, and I have been struggling with this because recently Piper Laurie passed away, and then I looked at her filmography and I was like, well, we've kind of already covered everything that she, like the big stuff, like it was like all the big things she's been in, and then there's like a whole bunch of stuff from the 60s, and I was like, I don't really want to watch any of that. And so I was like just kind of going through the different people who are in Twin Peaks, and I finally settled on a movie from I don't even know when this is from, sorry, from 1998, called Twist of Fate. I know nothing about this movie. But it has two Twin Peaks alumni in it. Shelley from Twin Peaks and Chris Mulkey are in it.
Oh.
And then a whole bunch of people I have never heard of before. But I don't know what it's about, but it is available on YouTube. And I will shoot you the link, Connor. And this has been on YouTube for 4 years, so I am assuming that it's not going to get taken down like next week before we record again. But that is the movie. That it's an hour and a half long, so it's not a super long movie. But it was either this or there was another movie that had Heather Graham and one of the Donnas. I can't remember which one, and it had like a pretty low rating as well. So I danced with the idea of doing that, and I may do that one again sometime in the future. But Twist of Fate from 1998, that rhymed. And so that's going to be it. Hopefully we will enjoy it, but I don't think that we can possibly enjoy it as much as we did Killing Me Softly.
Yeah, I'm looking it up. Apparently it has another title too called Psychopath.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should take a little. Ooh, this has 11 reviews on Letterboxd, so we're gonna get there nice and early. I'm excited for this one. Okay.
All right. And I should mention that I've been hovering over your Letterboxd to see what you are going to say about Killing Me Softly, and I eagerly look forward to seeing what you said.
You can look it up right now.
Mr. Nielsen gave it a 1 star. Yep. You love the sleazy masquerading as classy. Yep. I agree. Guilty pleasure. Just regular pleasure here. But yeah. So that's all I have to say, I think. Any final words, Connor?
No. You just if anyone's out there, I was gonna give a little bit of symmetry to this, but I'll just like make like this movie and just pay off nothing. You guys have a good day.